Hello. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm still waiting for Hero. So we know
It wouldn't totally surprise me if Hero isn't a morning person.
you may not be.
I just have this sense from what I know that Hero might not be. Ah, there he is.
Good morning.
Is Hero a morning person?
I am such a morning person. Shalom. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's so lovely to see you.
I was just telling Rachel that I thought there was a slight chance that you might not be a morning person.
Oh, you know what's really interesting is that I am not a morning person. Not at all. I'm not sure what gave that away.
I said nothing. But the funny thing is, Nicole, if before you popped on, if Hero and I had a chance to discuss things, I would have totally jabbed you a little bit for that anyway, because that's just what we do. So
We totally do it. I mean, what kind of discussion would it be if we didn't?
exactly.
If there was no jabs, there'd be no point in talking.
Exactly. And Rachel, you're wearing the same damn sweater as you were yesterday.
Rachel, what's going on?
I'm actually not. I haven't worn this in months.
Well, this is a new sweater, so I mean, maybe you should check your wardrobe, damn it.
You're feisty, but you know what? You're going to see the recording we did yesterday. You're going to be like, yeah, she wasn't wearing that sweater yesterday.
No, but you know what, though? It's okay. Nicole won't see that until tomorrow.
Who were you interviewing yesterday?
We were interviewing a woman named Kristen Zerbin, who is the creator of Hoochie Booch Kombucha.
Nice. That sounds great.
Yes.
I can't do kombucha. It doesn't really agree with me.
It's okay. A lot of people, it doesn't actually. So, no need.
It's a little bit of a number on my digestion, but it's supposed to be very good for your digestion, right? That's one of its things.
The gut health, apparently, yes.
The gut health.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But what we learned, Nicole, is that a lot of kombuchas that you buy in the store, they're full of not just added sugar, but so many different kinds of fruit juices with the acidity that actually some of them actually are not great on your stomach. Although so it just depends on the booch, I guess.
I need to check out the Hoochie Booch.
Yeah, exactly. So nice to see you, Nicole.
Me too.
How have you been?
I've been doing pretty. I've been doing pretty good. I mean, I have definitely. I think a lot of people are saying this. It's like the pandemic has definitely had me be present to all the ways in which I possess a lot of privilege. And yes, there's also been kind of a blanket of fear and anxiety and kind of depression in there and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And a lot of unexpected things too. Like I really thought when the pandemic first happened last spring, like I'm going to lose my job. My career is just going to go into the toilet because everywhere I was working was totally in crisis. And so I decided that I would sort of look into getting my master's degree in counseling because it was something that I'd always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it seems like probably a good field to get into now. And obviously yoga therapy is going to go the way of the dodo bird because it's already a hustle to keep that going. So I applied for and got into this program and the work didn't stop. Well, the work stayed, which is good, but what it's ended up being is just like a very, very full, without using the B word, a very, very full time. So there's been that too. There's like a lot of gratitude and a lot of good stuff happening, and then a little bit of overwhelm and everything that's happening on the planet.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like that.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Well, and interestingly, I mean, with what you do, I mean, I would have been surprised if you were out of a job, just only because of, with mental health being at the forefront. I mean, it's like a second pandemic. That's what everyone's been saying with what's been happening the past year, that if anything, I think people need it more than ever. Although with that being said, we didn't get a chance to introduce you fully. I'm not exactly sure what you are doing exactly right now at this time, because I know you've done multiple things and, you know, done teaching other teachers and, you know, have your own private practice and all those kinds of things. So maybe explain to us what, who is Nicole right now? I know maybe not who is Nicole from, you know, many, many years, but who is Nicole now? What has Nicole been doing now?
I mean, in terms of work, it's very much the same kind of work that I've been doing since about 2010.
Okay.
So I have a private practice where I see folks one-to-one, folks who might identify themselves as being trauma survivors. I have my own business called Fine Balance Yoga, where I facilitate trauma-informed yoga teacher trainings to mental health professionals, to yoga teachers, to yoga therapists. I'm the director of teacher training and mentorship for a nonprofit organization called Yoga Outreach. And Yoga Outreach, among other great things, trains volunteer yoga teachers in trauma-informed yoga theory and techniques, and then places them into organizations that serve populations of people that might not otherwise get access to yoga programming.
Yeah.
I'm working as a yoga therapist at a wellness center down in Yaletown called Boreal Wellness, where I have the honor of being able to support first responders and public safety personnel who are off work with a diagnosis of PTSD in this 10-week trauma day treatment program. I'm working with women who are fleeing situations of human trafficking at Deborah's Gate. So
yeah.
It's a lot, and you know, like a lot of yoga teachers, it's like sort of different gigs here and there, and it's all very satisfying, and it's a lot.
No kidding.
Like a lot.
And how blessed are you, not just yourself, but the people that are able to receive all the knowledge and all the lessons that you have to share with them, you know? It makes a big difference.
That's kind.
Well, for sure, though, right? I mean, in an industry where a lot of people, me included, have been very much, you know, taken back a little bit, to be able to have a niche and an outlet where not only are you needed, but also you are specialized in that area, and that those people can receive your gifts is huge.
Yeah, I feel like I managed to get like positioned in a very unique way, and not a way that's always been easy, right? It was sort of like, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to do. But, you know, 10 years ago, you're talking to people about using yoga as a way to address the aftermath of traumatic experience, and people would look at you like, just no idea what you were talking about. Or you'd be at a party and they'd sort of walk away. It's not a good party starter.
Right, that's fair.
You know, nobody wants to hear about that at the party. So, fair. But now it's you know, it's more widely recognized. Certainly, you know, somatic psychotherapy is really popular now, right? A lot of people doing that. So this idea of bringing the body into trauma treatment is
absolutely
more widely recognized. So I'm happy about that. And I don't think I would have lasted if I was a studio teacher. You know, there wasn't enough there for me. And I think that there are different people that get a lot out of that, but it just wasn't necessarily my place, which I'm sure you all understand.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
We definitely do.
Rachel, you had a studio, right?
Have a small studio, yeah, and I like how I downplay it, like it's a small studio, but yes, I had a, well, because as in size, it was a small community-minded studio. Yeah, we've had, like, Hiro and I have had very open conversations about the yoga community in Vancouver, and just, you know, kind of, not that we want to burn any bridges, but being fairly open and honest about how it operates, and, you know, how the corporations or the larger studios have, you know, had taken over in the past, but even how they've struggled, you know, and it's not for, I mean, we all, you know, we say that certain professions are not for the faint of heart, but being a yoga teacher really is not. I mean, and we also talk about how the fact that, you know, the training that we went through, and I would hope that it changes, but I feel like the business side of yoga really needs to be at the forefront, especially living in Vancouver. I know yoga was never meant to be something that you were supposed to get a monetary exchange for, but that's just the reality of living in even especially in Vancouver and the prices that we have to pay to survive in the city. So it's something that we're both pretty passionate about talking about. And to be honest, Nicole, like I got out of that few years ago. I live in the Okanagan now. So
yeah, I kind of followed that a little bit. I had that sense, and then I had a little bit of communication with the person who had taken over your studio. So I knew that you had made that transition.
Yeah. So I just, I kind of had enough with not just yoga, but I just wanted a clean slate and a bit of a different lifestyle, not just about the yoga, but just, I wanted to find it again. And the conversation's not about me, but
I sort of feel like making it about you because I haven't seen you both in so long. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
It'll be a collaboration.
But same about you. I mean, and Nicole, like, and just to bring it back to you, I mean, I'll never forget. I know I only did a very short training with you. It was like 3 days at Eastside Yoga, or Ocean and Crow in East Van. But I'll never, ever forget that because it's something, I would almost say that almost every person walking into a yoga studio as a student, or almost every human has dealt with some form of trauma in their life, like whether it be, if you want to measure it, whether it be a speck, whether it be a enormous planet that's on their shoulder. I mean, so, but your training, I mean, what we talk about how to create this environment that is, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. That's open for everybody is not something we get taught in teacher trainings, in your average teacher training, which I think is so key. There's certain like major things I think that are missing, that and the business of yoga, I think. So, anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely hear that. And certainly when I often run into students, and because I work in different yoga therapy training schools, right? Yeah. And I often have folks wanting to know about more training. What other training should I do? And pretty much straight across the board, I say, take a small business course.
Awesome.
Take it from the only child who thought that, when I completed this master's degree in yoga therapy studies, that I was going to burst out into the world, and people were going to want me. This is the curse of the only child, right? And lo and behold, it's been a very rocky ride the last 11 years to come to terms with the fact that I'm running a business, and I didn't really want to do that, and I didn't really have a lot of innate skill. I did take a small business course, but it's not second nature to me. And I think that people just don't understand that. And so often when I'm teaching, I say, this is entrepreneurial. There's not going to be a job waiting for you.
Yes.
Nobody's advertising roles for yoga teachers or yoga therapists in the health authority or whatever it is that you're interested in doing. Right. You have to do that. And it takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of chutzpah. It takes a lot of
absolutely,
you got to be willing to put yourself forward. So I think that sometimes there's a misunderstanding of that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are all the ways in which monetizing a spiritual practice is incredibly problematic. And all of the ways in which it's very problematic for someone who doesn't have yoga woven into their ancestry to be appropriating that spiritual practice and monetizing it, right? So I can understand wanting to move to the Okanagan and get a clean slate.
Yeah.
I mean,
I get it, right? But Hero, let's move to the Okanagan and get a clean slate with Rachel.
Can we get a clean slate and I can start drinking wine because I've never drank in my life, and then we can see how I do with being a wine connoisseur.
There you go.
I know, totally.
It sounds so fluffy and beautiful and lovely, but honestly, I left. Speaking of trauma, that studio traumatized me. We didn't, and Hero and I haven't actually got into all the ways that it did, but because we kind of slowly started to talk about the surface of the studio, but you know, being a small business owner and carrying the whole thing on your shoulders, and not that I didn't ask for help, but I tried to do it all on my own. And it was, and I come from a long background for myself of things, you know, generalized anxiety disorder and OCD and blah, 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 and depression and all those things. I mean, I had a couple of like honest mental breakdowns, for lack of better words. I mean,
I do not doubt it at all. The studio system is totally dysfunctional, and obviously, like, trying to take on that kind of system on your own, very difficult. It's a very, very rough business, and it's interesting because as a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist, people often think that, you know, our sort of ultimate desire is to own a studio. And I have people say that to me a lot, and I'm just like, no, that's like my biggest nightmare. I don't want to do that. Yeah. I appreciate people that do. I appreciate people that do it well and who create spaces for community gather. You know, as someone who's interested in supporting trauma survivors, I understand the importance of community, of connection as a way of breaking isolation, you know, creating relationships. So I'm always grateful for people that want to create those spaces for community. But it's a tough gig, and it doesn't surprise me that you had some really, really hard experiences there.
And I think that, you know, I think that what I was doing is I have a lot of business knowledge. I have like marketing and sales experience for many years. So I was like, well, yeah. I got this. Like, maybe I knew a lot of business studio owners who didn't have that background. They only maybe had the yoga. So like, you know what? Maybe I can do this. There was that in it, but the reality is that it's not really a feasible business plan in Vancouver necessarily. No. Now, with that being said, just to bring it back to you, Nicole, like just thinking about, you know, how you bring something. I know the word passion is totally overused, but I'm going to say it anyway. Something you're passionate about, something that you've used for yourself, for your own healing with yoga. And then now you bring it into, I mean, I know it's been many years now, but you bring it into what you use as a tool to help other people on a daily basis. And you're talking about how many different facets, how many different things you're doing. And it's all it's fairly heavy. Do you find that because with me, like, I started to lose that zest for yoga. Do you ever find that for yourself that you teeter on that balance? Like, how do you,
what's zest?
You know, the thing that, you know, you grind off of citrus fruit,
right? I do, but I think that one of the compulsions that I have, that human beings have, and that I certainly possess, is the compulsion to cultivate meaning. So I cultivate a lot of meaning from the work that I do. And I think that that's one of the aspects of my way of doing the work that has it feel a little more sustainable. So I'm clear about the why of my work, and I'm clear about the outcomes. I'm clear about the value of it. I'm clear and always getting clearer about the complexities of it. And there are many layers of complexities. You know, some of that's rooted in issues of, you know, the perpetuation of colonization and cultural appropriation, and really diving into that conversation and looking at ways to address harm and ameliorate that and be responsible for that and uplift folks who have historically been marginalized, and use, you know, my privilege and the listening that I have in the community to bring other people in. Like, I get to do that a lot in yoga outreach, which I love. And then there's just also being really clear. I think that where I would get burnt out in yoga was when I felt like there wasn't a lot of meaning. And that was sort of happening for me about 5 years into teaching in studios, because I did a lot of that work, right? Like I was a power yoga teacher. And I started to come into this place where, although I understand that yoga is inherently, has the potential to be inherently therapeutic, there was something missing for me, kind of like the why of what I was doing and the real, having a real understanding of the outcome or the potential outcome. A lot of the times I left feeling like an aerobics instructor. And there's nothing wrong with being an aerobics instructor if that's what you choose, you know?
Yep.
But it hadn't been the choice that I had was sitting very well with me at that point. And because I was trained very much in a post-lineage fashion, and I don't have yoga woven into my ancestry, I felt even more confused about what the F I was doing. So getting a deeper grounding, you know, in particular in trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga, and starting to understand more deeply who I was and who I wasn't. What I was doing and what I wasn't doing, and starting to be really straight with people about that instead of pretending that I actually was an expert in yoga, which of course I'm not and I never will be. Stuff's really started to open up a lot more for me. And so I feel very fueled by all of that now. I've been able to find meaning, and I've been able to identify some of the problematic pieces that were always sort of niggling at me and start to address some of those.
Love that.
So most of the time I feel really excited about the work that I do and really energized. It's just sometimes managing it all feels like a lot. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I try to be sort of diplomatic when I'm talking, and I think sometimes it can make what I'm saying a little unclear.
No. When it comes to being diplomatic, you are in an you're in an industry and in a side of the industry that is very sensitive and has people that might be listening and tuning in, not just on our podcast, but just in general. You're in a certain positioning where your language has even more impact than another individual might. So with Rachel and myself, like on the podcast, we're very candid, but we also meet our guests where they are at. And so every conversation is a little bit different. And we knew when we were going to have you come onto our show, having worked with you even minimally in our past, we know how to gauge and how to understand the people that we might be reaching through the guests we have. Cool. So you let yourself express what you need to share in the tone and in the frequency that is authentic to you, because that's what our podcast is about. So the fact that you shared what you shared already so far, and we're just getting into this, is really beautiful, you know. And
awesome.
And you've been through a lot and you've experienced a lot, and you're quite transparent about that. And you don't have to share any of that if you don't want to either. That's not why I'm saying this, but this is your place to feel safe in our home to really just be really authentic and real. And we like to pull the mask off of our guests in the sense of just be who you need to be right now, right? There's no agenda.
Well, you know, as the only child of two therapists, I do love to talk about myself. So, you know, please don't. You notice how when you emailed me, I got right back to you, and I was like, of course, I'd love to talk about myself with you.
Yes, I'm the same way, though. I mean, what do you talk about? Not the stereotype Jews, but Jews not talking about themselves? I mean, is there such a thing?
And so, are you Jewish, Nicole?
Yeah, on my mother's side.
Okay. There you go.
So you're actually a Jew.
Well, I'm not a great Jew. I'm sort of an average Jew, but
Jews.
I am. Yeah. And it's actually it's a big. It's funny to joke about, but it's one of these pieces that I feel is really missing for me. And again, this is one of these aspects of colonization. The colonizers also lose their connection to heritage, to spirituality, to ritual, to language. And it's a piece that's quite sad for me. I feel like culturally I have a little bit of it, but it feels like a missing piece for me, for sure.
Me too, actually. That's interesting that you say that. Like, I feel like I almost have maybe having a right is the wrong way to put it, but I feel like I should be doing more with the heritage that I have, or learn more about it. And also, and we've talked about this on our podcast a few times, but speaking of trauma, there's a big topic that's been around for a few years around trauma surrounding it, which is intergenerational trauma. Right. So we had a doctor on our show from the Mount Sinai University named Dr. Rachel Yehuda.
Oh my goodness. I know Dr. Rachel Yehuda. I know her work. Talking about epigenetics and stuff.
And we had Jeannie Becker on with us at the same time.
Wow, you two are like superstars. This whole podcast went up and up there. You had me at Dr. Rachel Yehuda.
You gotta check it out.
Yeah, and we were blessed. I can't believe that was so early on. I mean, our show's still 6 months old, but still. But with that being said, I mean, both Hero and I being from Holocaust surviving grandparents, both of us, both from Poland, I think, right, Hero? Yeah.
Poland and Lithuania.
And just, there's so many layers to trauma. Like, I can't even, there's so many things that I feel like in my life that when I react to things, I'm like, is that even really me? Or is it spiritually, is it someone speaking through me from my past? Like, it's a very confusing thing. Like, do you do any work in that realm, Nicole, or have you?
I certainly do work supporting Indigenous folks.
Yes.
Both in my private practice and offering programs through Yoga Outreach. So Yoga Outreach has 2 different programs happening right now, both of which we've been able to move forward through grants. One is a collaboration between Yoga Outreach and an organization called Cedar and Gold, and a yoga teacher and a PhD candidate and a mother whose name is Jessica Barudin. So we've had the honor of collaborating with her to develop something called the First Nations Women's Yoga Initiative, which is an 80-hour trauma-informed yoga training that's woven in with Indigenous understandings around healing.
Wow.
And topics like neurodecolonization. And then there's also a language component. And it's a program that was designed primarily for Kwakwaka'wakw women. So that's been kind of incredible. And then we're also developing a program in collaboration called the Indigenous Children and Youth Yoga and Mindfulness Project through Yoga Outreach. So I've had a little bit of experience doing, helping to hold space for folks who really might identify themselves as still living with the impacts of intergenerational trauma.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing though is that I think about when I first came across you, and when I was finished my 200-hour, I knew that I wanted to do trauma sensitive training even before I knew. Well, I think I must have researched the training beforehand, but I knew it's like, okay, I'll do my 200 first, and right away I just finished it. I think 2 days prior, and then I stepped into your training. And it was interesting when I saw you. And I remember we kind of looked at each other, and this might be my own delusion.
And you were so cute with your blonde hair.
Was I blonde at that time?
I think so.
Oh my God, blondes do have more fun.
Baby hero.
Yeah, I came in there, and I just remember you looked at me, and you're like, oh, you.
He's cute.
Oh, I still got it with the women, apparently. But I remember just... again, because of our nature and energy, there was just like some symbiosis there. There was just something there. And then after the training, I came up to you and said, you and me are going to keep in touch. And you're like, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you see so many people, obviously, but I just knew that there was a kinship from the very beginning. And I just remember like, she's going to love this that I'm saying this, but my friend Katrine Steben, who was in your training and came in beside me, she came in late. And it's funny because she's always chronically late. So it's funny we mentioned that I'm not a morning person. And so she comes in, or no, you know what? Did I come? No, I came in late. Because I couldn't
find. They give you a hard time for being late?
Yeah, you do, but it's fine. But I couldn't find the room. So not that it's any shade, but it was in Rhodes Wellness College, right down. Do you remember Rhodes Wellness College, Rachel?
I do. I mean, I remember. I'm working there right now, actually. Oh, wow. Because there's a yoga school that I work for, the Vancouver School of Healing Arts, got
they moved
absorbed by them.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So I'm back there.
So funny. So like when I showed into the building and everything, I knew where the building was, but because it was like you go up to this floor, you go to the back, and it's in this room. So I'm like, and then I go in, and then I'm like, and then Katrine like flags me and like tells me to sit right beside her. And now Katrine is one of my best friends, is what I'm getting at. And it's funny because you were like, oh, so thanks for coming in late. And I said, I'm so sorry.
I did not say thanks for coming in late.
No, I can't. I have a horrible memory.
Did not say that.
No,
I would never say that.
I probably sensitive environment.
I probably gave you the stink eye.
Maybe, and then I was like,
and that's what you heard in the stink eye. But I would never say that to someone.
No, I was like, hi, I'm the little shit.
Oh my god.
But it worked, considering.
Hero, like, was it? I feel like you subconsciously did that today then. Because
did I?
Well, you were late.
Yeah, well, you know what though? No, I usually set my alarm at 8 a.m.
I'm teasing you, but it is I know. I'm making you sweat. Really curious about the fact that you went to school in Boston. And are you, so not to poo-poo Americans, but are you American?
Yes, I am American. I was born in Buffalo. My father was born in Ohio. My mother was born in Rochester. Previous to that, my ancestors came over to North America, Turtle Island, right around World War I as political, economic, and religious refugees. So my mother just gave up her U.S. citizenship. My father still has dual citizenship, and I do too.
Wow.
Okay.
So the master's degree that I did through Lesley University was called an Independent Study Master's Program. They don't have it anymore as far as I know. Okay. I was like a yoga teacher, like other yoga teachers, and there were all these trainings that I was interested in taking, and they're expensive, and I couldn't get any academic credit for them, and I was sort of like, I don't know if I want to be doing this. And I did a little research, and I found this wonderful woman named Beth Gibbs down in, I believe she's in Boston, who had completed her master's degree in yoga therapy studies. And I contacted her and said, how did you do this? And so not only did she direct me to the program at Lesley, she actually became one of my academic advisors as well. Oh. And so I found this program, and essentially in this program, what you did is you developed a 2-year curriculum proposal. So I inserted the yoga therapy training that I wanted to complete, a training in mindfulness-based stress reduction with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Santarelli, a small business course, and a couple of other pieces. And so I did the work associated with those programs as well as additional academic work around those programs. And then I did a research study, a thesis, a master's thesis, like a massive thing.
Wow.
So I would go there. I was living in Vancouver, but I would fly to Boston 3 or 4 times a year in order to meet with my academic team and keep them on track. It's funny when you do a master's degree, in some ways it feels like you're kind of hurting them, but yeah.
I am not a school person. So
not even close yet.
Oh my God. I went to Cap College at the time when it was Cap College for a few courses. I honestly never really had any idea what I wanted to do until more recently, I feel like.
But I'm exactly the same way. You know, I got kicked out of high school. I never graduated.
Yeah.
School was a total nightmare for me. I was like one of those classic Langara students. I discovered student loans, and I was there for like 2.5 years, and I accidentally got a diploma in classical studies. It's just completely out of control. So I understand that. Mm-hmm. But I guess that it's always been important to me to have, I haven't really thought about this very much, to have all that work and all that money be going into something that is, you know, has some kind of recognizable credential.
Yeah.
You know, I'm certified in trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga. The acronym for that is TCTSY-F. Nobody knows what that is. Right?
Oh my God.
And so, not that it should make a difference, but I think to some extent it has made a difference in certain situations for me to have that. And I also understand that having access to education and having access to the resources to get at that education is a huge, huge privilege.
I wonder, as the science has caught up with, you know, finally proving that, for example, you know, trauma lives in parts of our body, that there's that mind-gut connection, like all these types of things that, you know, maybe wasn't apparent before in the scientific community, but now over the past maybe just a few years, that's become more apparent. So that's been maybe the reason why people are like, oh, okay, this makes sense because it's proven, like it's more proven. So I wonder if it's, you know, now you're talking about your accolades and things you've done and your designations. Do you feel like people are getting it more finally?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge expansion in the psychiatric community and the psychological community and the psychotherapeutic community around understanding trauma theory and the sort of physiological impacts of trauma. And trauma is, as you said at the beginning, ubiquitous. It's universal, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily, it's tied into social justice. You know, it's tied into race-based trauma. It's tied into everything. Mm-hmm. So I think that there have been expansions for many reasons. Part of it is like empirical validation. Part of it are social justice movements.
True. Yeah.
And also, you know, what's happened in psychotherapeutic communities for sure. Mm-hmm. People definitely understand the work a lot more. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the correlation of the vast knowledge you have and the skill sets you've been able to acquire through your education and the people you've worked with, how have you noticed in the last year with the shifts in politics, the shift in social dialogue, I guess neutralization of human rights of people, like all the stuff that is happening right now? Have you noticed any shifts in yoga outreaches, curriculum, and your placement in what you're facilitating or the people that are facilitating those types of criteria or contents?
Well, for many years, yoga outreach has been committed to practices of decolonization and cultivating more diversity and focusing on equity and inclusion. So there's been a shift in our offerings, I'd say, for the last 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And part of that has looked like centering BIPOC voices, and so giving them platforms. And there are a few different ways that we do that. We do that through knowledge development series, which is like a series of workshops that people can kind of design their own thing and come in and, we offer a platform for it. Part of that is our Core 2 training, which is sort of a part 2 to our Core 1 training. The Core 1 training is a training in trauma-informed yoga that's really specific for people that want to volunteer with yoga outreach. Okay. And then the Core 2 is rooted in all of the social justice pieces that we kind of skim on the surface in the Core 1, but that we really wanted to dig a little deeper into. And so we bring various facilitators in who have lived experiences of those different types of, who have lived experience, basically, to facilitate those pieces. We, have re-examined our tuition and created a lot more scholarship positions, and all of our programs are sliding scale.
Oh, wow.
We have, so that organization has been changing a lot. And like all of that kind of change, it's always well worth it. And it can be rough sometimes, because you're unpacking the ways in which you've been complicit and, the ways in which you benefit off of the suffering or the oppression of other people. So, we can make those changes, but sometimes the process of it has been rough.
Yeah. It's
the learning.
It's almost like the world's sort of almost caught up with what you guys have been doing for a number of years already. Not the world, but I mean, people, it's, finally a lot of those things are coming into the spotlight, or coming into the spotlight, really. But it's, you've already been kind of doing the work for a few years in that respect.
I feel like we have, but we don't talk about it very much in some ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, we sort of just go about our business, and we're very interested in, cultivating relationships and staying humble, and just step by step, stepping in the right way, working in the right way, and, being responsible in places where there's a call to be responsible, and cleaning up messes when we're able to. And sometimes, we don't get it totally right, but we're very committed to the conversation, and we're very committed to being in action despite our fumblings.
Yeah. We're going to fumble all the time, especially when we're trying to create new content, new movements, new experiences for people, and for the goodness of true intention of helping. And there's many people that have had, and without naming any names, there have been people in our community that have made leaps and bounds to be inclusive and to help other people, to create more gateways to expand people's knowledge, right? And there are going to be places of stumbling, or ways of marketing, ways of communication that maybe were really well intentioned, that maybe are not always right. And so that's just with any industry, with any business that's trying to be authentic, or any person that's trying to be a leader for something, that whether they are part of that demographic or they're trying to be an ally, there's so many different ways that can be misinterpreted or reinterpreted by the outside. But the fact that people are trying to do something about it, I think, is what we need to focus on, and to understand that if it's coming from the proper intention of what they're trying to be putting out there, that how do we support those people that are trying to actually make a difference, instead of scrutinizing or criticizing them, because they're not trying to do it on purpose. And if they were, it would be pretty clear if there was an ulterior motive, right?
Well, there's also always the conversation about intent versus impact, and, a place to be responsible for that. So we might be well-meaning, and that's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that the impact is always correlate with that.
Yeah.
So again, like I said, the learning is not going to be easy. In fact, sometimes it's going to be really difficult. But of course, that pales in comparison to the lived experience of many, many, many people in our community and on the planet who are having a really hard time every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's another piece, right? Just remembering that, you know, the intention is not necessarily equal to the impact.
No, for sure. And again, as Rachel and I speak about, we are very like-minded, but also quite different in our approach to how we've created our careers and our presences in the community. And I've been very under the radar for a couple years now, and I am proud of being under the radar in a sense because it allows me to express and to voice what is most important to what I feel is my dharma, my purpose as a human, but also in the lens of being a facilitator of the experience of yogic ethics, I guess, for lack of better terms, or philosophies. And my point for that whole statement is it's not easy being authentic to who you are in a framework that people are so conditioned by what they think they should be like or how they have to be like. So if that means being a studio teacher, a teacher trainer, being a business operator, things in the yoga realm, you know, it'll eat you up, you know, and you can choose to be eaten up if you want and get enough out of it until you get swallowed, and then you're like, okay, I've hit my threshold, it's time for me to go, you know. And that's kind of what happened to me in a sense. It's let me get what I needed to get, and I did what I needed and sacrificed and just enough until I hit my breaking point and burnt out, and then said, nah, I'm not just leaving, like I'm not coming back, you know.
So you're not teaching right now?
I'm teaching part-time with the city of Burnaby, and that's where I've been the last year, and that kind of stumbled by mistake. I got referred, and I'm very broken and very knew my boundaries. I knew, like, I don't need this, but if we want to do this is how it needs to work for me, because I'm not going to restart for the fourth time to try and build something for myself. And timing, and in very short way of description, timing, relationships, and receptivity of the audiences, the demographics, and the person that is still my coordinator, that just all fell into place. And then I'd finally built like 12 to 15 a week in one place on my own finally. And COVID hit. So that was like, okay, all right, I tried again, and it was very successful. So I'm still there, but 2 classes a week, and I'm grateful to even have that. I'm grateful to even have that.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping that when COVID transitions, that even if it's never going to be the same, it'll at least neutralize for it to be enough for my own life. You know, in short, my life, because one thing the pandemic has taught me is that I need to teach, and I am a studio teacher. I'm a community builder, and that can be done in many ways. But for me, this whole Zoom stuff just doesn't work for me. It's great as a podcast platform, which is a great blessing to connect people. But if someone said to me, you're going to be on a camera doing this format for teaching for the rest of your life, I'd say, all right, well, I'll do some of it, but it's not going to be my 24/7 live and breathing. It's not cut out for everybody.
Certain things you won't sacrifice for. Well, and that and it all comes back to like your intention, your intent, your impact. Why, your impact, you know, and, you know, I think that specifically with the yoga studio that I had, what ended up happening to me is that I lost that why and that intention, and all it was about was survival.
Yeah.
All it was about was ending up to be about my survival of, making enough money to put gas in my car. Like that's literally what it ended up being. So, you know, and you kind of pivot and you try to find different ways of doing things. And you can't, you know, Hero, it's amazing that you've restarted yourself and done it 3 or 4 times. And, you know, that's kind of just not to belittle that, but it's life too. Like it's going to happen.
Again. Yeah, it is life. It's a process. It's process. Leave it to the Jewish resilience. I mean, but actually, you know?
Yeah, it's true. And you are very resilient.
Oh, well, thank you. But enough about me. Nicole,
Mm-hmm.
so I
Mm-hmm.
was actually looking at the Langara website last night and
Mm-hmm.
I noticed an update saying that the integrated yoga therapy program is no longer being offered in its full capacity. And
None of the programs are offered there. The whole department was closed down
okay,
around December.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
So, yeah, we put that up on the website. We put it out on our newsletter and we announced it in social media. The college really took a hit during the pandemic, and there were also some shifts in upper management who had sort of a different focus. So a few, pretty well established, highly regarded kind of programs were cut. And I think that overall there's a restructuring happening there. My role there as the program coordinator really was supposed to be temporary. I was only supposed to be there for about 3 months, and then that ended up getting extended. And it happened that I was there during the pandemic, which was so odd because all of a sudden it was like I'm holding the space for this program, several programs, and having to really fight for those programs, fight to run them, fight to keep them. And in some ways it felt like fighting for something that wasn't exactly mine, but that program is no longer, which is unfortunate, right? It was like 12 or 13 years old. Those were beautiful programs. It was the first, I think the only yoga teacher training that had ever been established in a post-secondary institution. And, the teachers in that program, the developers of those programs, the managers, everybody, those people were very, very, very committed.
Yes. And so that's why I mentioned that, because I was, again, talk about adapting and changing and resilience. I made it a conscious choice for this year to go into my yoga therapy programming, and that the specific curriculum and outline of what the Langara one looked like actually kind of met what I was looking for, that I felt other yoga therapy trainings lacked or didn't work for my clinical mindset. And I can see your expression in it's, but you know what I mean, though? It's like,
and we had a lot of people that were taking other programs there that were going to, flow into that. And it was a heartbreak to close it down. And but it wasn't really something that we had a lot of choice around. It was kind of like,
of course.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. There are some other programs out there that are really great. If that is, a direction that you want to go in. But, as we were sort of saying before, kind of to circle back, it's like, it's a business, and, you're running a business.
With COVID now, and even after COVID, it's not something that I think is going to be realistic in terms of the next 10 years. Maybe in the future there might be a resurgence, in my opinion, with the minimal knowledge that I have to see the foresight. But it's interesting how we look at, I'm going to go and do this, I'm going to go and do that, and again, nope, right? And then it's like, okay, great, because I'm not a school person, as we've all kind of talked about. And so one time I'm like, I'm going to go back to school, and it's like, and no, you're not. It's like, you're going to go to school of life, you're not going to a college. Like,
that's
great.
School of life. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was going to mention that as well, because Nicole has come in and out of my sphere, kind of ebbing and flowing through the years. Because I guess it was 8 years ago, actually, this month, that you and I met. And one thing I do want to gush a little bit about you, Nicole, is that you've always been there as an advocate, as a supporter, and I don't take that lightly by any means. But you've always seen people for who they are, and those people that are trying to do something different, or that are genuinely wanting to connect and do something with what they have to share. And so I've always given you credit for that, in more than just that, but just you've always been real, right? And I remember when I did my 500-hour and you came in and facilitated the training again. So I had the privilege of being in that training twice. It was it's really neat to kind of see those evolutions and how people grow, how they change, and how commitment makes all the difference. Because what you've done with Yoga Outreach, what you've done with your own personal business, and the things you put out there, I mean, can you think of any main takeaways? I mean, because you're still doing everything you're doing, but can you think of a few takeaways that you can share with our listeners, our viewers that will see this, that maybe they don't know? Like, what are a few things that you could pass down to those people?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, do you mean in terms of like cultivating a yoga career that's fulfilling? Is that what you mean?
Yoga career, but also maybe life lessons, even expanding it beyond yoga. Like, we're getting really juicy. Like, we're getting really like just.
The first thing that comes to mind is like, am I now at that age where people are asking me for life lessons? I was like, really? Did that just happen?
Life lessons so far.
Oh my God!
In brackets.
I'm really not sure if I have a lot to provide in terms of advising people on how to live their lives. I guess that for me, and I talk about this a lot in my work, and, it's a little bit like a broken record, but for me, the most important thing has always been relationships. So whether that's, relationships with my family, with my partner, with my friends, with my students, with my clients, much of what I do is relationship based, and often not always intentionally sort of coming back into like, how can I be connected? How can I have other people connect? And so I guess that I've always had a bit of, although I'm relatively independent, I've always had a compulsion to bring folks together and create community. And that's been one of the things that's been really exciting for me. And, sort of like what you were saying, Hero, like supporting people and finding their own expression out in the world, and giving them a little encouragement, in any way that I can, because I got a lot of that, I had a lot of privilege, and I got a lot of encouragement to express myself in an authentic way out in the world. And so I feel like, I get a lot out of being able to do that with other people. Yeah. So I don't know if that's a life lesson or not, but I'm not sure if I'm totally in a position to be offering that yet. You got to wait until I'm like in my 70s or something.
We'll have you back when you're in your 70s.
You know what I mean? Like, give me a little time here.
Sounds good. Rachel, you good to do this for another few decades?
Well, I was going to say, Hero's not the best at telling age too, I think. And we've said this story about a bajillion times on the podcast, but when I first met, I know he's rolling his eyes because I think we told this yesterday too. When Hero and I first met, what was that, like 5 years ago, maybe now? Something like that. Yeah, he's just going to ignore what I'm going to say. But basically, I was saying that I was super sweaty, and we were at actually Beautiful. So we were down at a, juice.
In Lower
Lonsdale. And he said to me, "Are you having a hot flash?" And it was the first time we met.
He dug deep down into his understanding of women's health.
Right. Yeah.
And diagnosed. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, no, I mean, I think, relationships, communication, I mean, those are all very important things, especially now. I mean, more than ever. I mean, people are, I think it depends on where you are in the world with the pandemic, because some places are still under very strict lockdown and some places are a bit more open than they were. But, being isolated and feeling like loneliness, all those types of things, that cultivating those relationships and communication with others is more important than ever right now, I think. It's also, I think it's more difficult than it ever has been as well, just because of what's going on. So it's just, it's just one of those things right now. Something that I was really curious about was how did you come to Vancouver? I know now we're going back, we're kind of jumping back and forth, but how did you go from being in the States to coming to Canada? I'm curious.
My mother fell in love with Vancouver in a National Geographic magazine.
Wow.
And she met my father and they decided to go on a road trip. And she said, let's go through Vancouver. And they did. And he fell in love with the mountains. And there was a university just opening up here called Simon Fraser University.
Yeah.
And so he applied for a job and they continued on their road trip. I was conceived in a van. So it started out in a very illustrious manner. And he got that job. And so that's when we got our citizenship. And there was a little bit of moving back and forth, but I landed here ultimately for good when I was 9 years old.
Okay. Oh, wow. Thank you. Graphic.
Yeah, no kidding. And thank you, Van. Yeah. And so where in Vancouver did you grow up primarily? Did you hop around or did you have a specific area that you were
I hopped around. I mean, my folks separated and I was raised primarily by my mom. And so we moved around a fair bit because finances were an issue. And so West Side, East Side, West End. Oh, wow. And most of my years have been spent in the downtown East Side and in Strathcona. So I live in Strathcona now, which is sort of on the border of the downtown East Side.
Yeah. Yes.
And I've lived here for close to 20 years.
Oh.
Okay. Got it. And I know we're coming into the kind of the transitioning of a conversation. Not quite yet, but was living in the Strathcona area any kind of inspiration or stimulus for you to work with that kind of population, or was it a side effect, or maybe neither?
I was living in East Vancouver because that's where I could afford to live.
Yeah.
And I have always, I think, been oriented to social work, social justice work. And so living in an environment that had a lot of those kinds of services, was probably fed into that a bit. I got very interested in this work. I was working at the BC Compassion Club Society in my early 20s, and I worked there for about 5 years.
Okay.
And the BC Compassion Club Society is BC's oldest compassion club, and it's only nonprofit.
Okay.
It has a wellness center next to it, and they use the proceeds from the cannabis sales to offset the costs of alternative or complementary healing modalities. So their members get access to acupuncture, herbalists, counseling. And it was a consensus-based decision-making model organization with 40 people in it, which is a big job to be doing consensus, and non-hierarchical. So I learned a lot there, and my primary job there was doing intakes. So I would have people's intake forms, and I would spend about an hour and a half with them, interviewing them in order to assess their needs, and also introducing them to the medicine and the services that we had there. And often what I was doing was, 3 or 4 of these hour-and-a-half long intakes or interviews with people who were living with chronic and terminal illnesses.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I got, from working there, I got very, very interested in this idea of like, who gets access to healthcare and who doesn't. And, the connection between social justice and access to healthcare.
Right. Yeah.
And then when I was there, that's when I started getting into yoga, and that's how I sort of made that connection.
Okay, got it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was an amazing, amazing place to work, and it's just one of those periods in my life where the learning continues. There's a few of those, but the learning just reverberates. That's where I learned how to facilitate a lot of meetings. It's where I learned how to do a lot.
Does it still exist? It still exists?
It's still around. I have no idea what's happening there. I think they've been around for like 30 years now or something.
Wow.
But
yeah,
they were really, really, really a great organization, and that was before legalization. So what we were doing was an act of civil disobedience, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm going to look that up. Actually,
yeah, I'd never even heard of it, which is great. The fact that
they're over on Commercial, the BCCCS.
Okay.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, well, we'll definitely add that into our show notes and everything else that was referenced in our discussion with you today. And then in terms of just kind of because I said like life lessons, so not life lessons, not necessarily last words, but is there anything that you want to give a shout out to, anything you want to give a little nudge to, where people can find what you're doing, or what others can find what you're doing, or what others are doing that you want others to know about?
Well, in terms of the work that I'm doing, people can find out about that at my website, which is finebalanceyoga.ca. Yoga Outreach is yogaoutreach.com. And if you connect to Yoga Outreach, then you get access to education with lots of different facilitators, some really, really interesting programs. And as I said, those programs are really on a sliding scale. So yoga teacher trainings and other kinds of professional development and personal development. And I think that's it for the shout out.
Love it.
Amazing. Well, before we fully wrap up this conversation, I do just wanted to commend you for all the work that you have done for our community and for our generations. And it's just one of the most prolific trainings I think I've done. Definitely one of the best short form trainings I've done.
Me too.
In my course of my teaching so far. And the warmth and the way you can cultivate space with that many people in one room is pretty phenomenal. And especially where it might be completely foreign to those that are coming into the first initial training too, that have no experience, and then to kind of dive into it and say, this is what we're doing and this is why you're here. It takes a really specific kind of skill set to make a safe space for those people. So commending you for that, major props. And thank you for being.
There's something that I just had this I was like, oh yeah, it was Nicole that taught me about boundaries. No, but because that's something else. So there's and what I love is what you do is you shine a light on some areas that are not necessarily in a generic or a general 200-hour teacher training. So these are additional things that I think every yoga teacher should be considering, honestly. And something that's I know we're about to wrap up here, but just something that I just was like, oh my God, that's right. Something else we're not really taught about is you're connecting with someone on such a emotional and, especially for someone like me, who I'm a bit of an empath. So I will take on other people's emotions and feelings. And there is that word boundary that's also something that's not really taught in our teaching. That's a really important, not just emotional boundaries, all kinds of boundaries, obviously, but students.
Yeah, we definitely touch on that in some of the work that I do. And you're right, yoga teachers don't get taught much about that. And that can end up being very problematic, as we've seen.
Absolutely. So I just personally, I want to thank you for those little gems throughout my quote unquote career as well. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to.
My pleasure.
Do you want
Thank you so much for thinking of me.
Oh my God, you were one of the first people I thought of when I thought about who to chat with and to catch up with. And Rachel, do you want to ask the question?
We'll ask the silly question because we have to end it on a bit of a silly note instead of
right.
serious. So our question for you is, if you were a juice, what would you be and why? Not a trick question.
Oh, if you were a juice, what would you be and why? I don't know. It's weird. The first thing that came to mind was carrot.
Okay.
That's a new one.
I think I'd be carrot juice because it's like, I don't taste very good, but I'm good for you. How's that?
I love it.
I think that's
is that okay?
Great. I think that's like, fantastic.
Carrot juice is kind of gross, but it's good for you. So I'll go for that. There you go.
That's absolutely perfect. So enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good rest of your week. And thank you so much for your gracing Rachel and myself with your time. And it really means a lot for me, for sure, to have you
yes, it does.
Full circle to have you on our show for everything you've done for me and for Rachel as well.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome to see what you're creating, and I appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Let me see the recording.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. And when do you think it'll be out, Rachel?
The weekend-ish. I'll send you the links. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
Take good care.
Well,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.